Have you ever wondered why the smartest men you know, the ones who excel at everything they touch, who solve complex problems at work, who have their finances in order and their lives seemingly figured out, somehow manage to sabotage their own love lives over and over again? Think about it for a moment. Maybe you've been that man. Maybe you are that man right now reading these words, feeling that familiar ache in your chest from a relationship that fell apart, and you still can't quite understand what went wrong. Before we dive deep into this journey together, I want to ask you something important. If you're serious about transforming your relationships and finally understanding the invisible forces that have been working against you, hit that subscribe button right now, and please give this video a like. But here's what I really need from you. Watch this entire video from start to finish. Don't skip ahead. Don't jump around. Because what I'm about to share with you isn't just information, it's a complete paradigm shift that could genuinely change your love life forever. The men who stick with me until the end are the ones who experience real transformation. Now let me tell you a story. There was once a man named Marcus. Not Marcus Aurelius, the great Stoic emperor, but a modern Marcus, a software engineer, brilliant mind, six-figure salary, respected by his peers. Marcus had everything figured out except for one thing: love. He'd been through 3 serious relationships in 5 years, and each one ended the same way. The women would leave, often with the same words: "I just don't feel connected to you anymore." Marcus would sit alone in his apartment, scrolling through old photos, trying to analyze where things went wrong like it was a bug in his code. But relationships aren't code. They're not problems to be solved with logic alone. Do you remember your first heartbreak? Close your eyes for a second and feel it. That moment when someone you loved looked at you differently, when the warmth in their eyes turned cold, when you realized that no matter how much you wanted to hold on, they were already gone. Maybe you're dealing with that pain right now. Maybe you're recovering from a breakup, lying awake at 3 in the morning, replaying every conversation, every moment, wondering if you could have done something differently. The ancient Stoics understood this pain. They knew that love and loss were inseparable parts of the human experience. But they also knew something else, that wisdom comes not from avoiding pain, but from understanding why we create it for ourselves. This is where our journey begins. Because the truth is, smart men make predictable mistakes with women. These aren't random errors. They're patterns, deeply ingrained habits that stem from the very intelligence and analytical abilities that make these men successful in other areas of life. And here's the paradox that Marcus discovered, and that you're about to discover too. Your greatest strengths in the boardroom become your greatest weaknesses in the bedroom and the relationship. Mistake number 1, the fortress of logic. Let me take you deeper into Marcus's story. There was a night about 2 years ago when his girlfriend Sarah came home from work visibly upset. Her eyes were red, her shoulders slumped. She sat down on the couch and said, "I had the worst day. My boss completely dismissed my presentation in front of the entire team." Marcus, being the problem solver he was, immediately went into analysis mode. Well, what exactly did he say? What were the weaknesses in your presentation? Did you anticipate the objections? Maybe you need to restructure your approach. Here's what you should do tomorrow. He went on for 15 minutes creating a detailed action plan. But Sarah didn't want an action plan. She wanted something Marcus couldn't give her in that moment. She wanted to be felt, not fixed. She wanted him to sit beside her, put his arm around her, and simply say, "That sounds incredibly frustrating. Tell me more about how that made you feel." But Marcus had built a fortress of logic around his heart, and from behind those walls, he couldn't see what she really needed. Think about your own relationships for a moment. How many times has someone you loved tried to share their feelings with you, and your immediate response was to offer solutions? How many times have you said, "Here's what you should do," when what they were really asking for was, "Here's how I should feel"? The Stoics taught us that reason is humanity's highest faculty, and they were right. But they also understood something that many modern men forget. Reason without empathy is coldness. Logic without compassion is cruelty. The fortress of logic is the first great mistake, and it's the most common. Smart men retreat into analysis because it's comfortable. It's what they're good at. In their professional lives, this skill serves them brilliantly. But relationships aren't engineering problems. A woman's emotions aren't bugs to be debugged. When your partner comes to you with fear, anxiety, sadness, or confusion, she's not presenting you with a puzzle to solve. She's inviting you into her emotional world, asking if you're brave enough to feel what she feels, to sit with her in the darkness without immediately reaching for the light switch of logic. Marcus learned this lesson the hard way. Sarah left him 6 months after that night on the couch. She tried to explain it to him. It's like talking to a consultant instead of a boyfriend. You're always so focused on fixing things that you never just feel things with me. He didn't understand it then, but he does now. And if you're recognizing yourself in this story, if you're feeling that uncomfortable stirring in your chest, that's good. That's the beginning of wisdom. Have you ever lost someone because you tried too hard to fix them? Have you ever watched someone walk away because you couldn't step out of your head and into your heart? The pain of that loss is real, and I want you to know it's okay to feel it. The Stoics didn't teach emotional suppression. They taught emotional understanding. There's a profound difference. Mistake number 2. The illusion of control. Let's continue with Marcus's journey because his story becomes our mirror. After Sarah left, Marcus spent months trying to understand what happened. He read books on relationships, studied attachment theory, took notes like he was preparing for an exam, and then he met Elena. Elena was different, vibrant, spontaneous, full of life. Marcus was determined not to make the same mistakes. So he created a strategy. He planned their dates meticulously, anticipated potential conflicts, and tried to guide the relationship toward his vision of perfection. At first, Elena found his attentiveness charming, but within 3 months she felt suffocated. "Why do you need to plan everything?" she asked one evening when he suggested they create a relationship roadmap with quarterly goals. "Why can't we just be?" Marcus was confused. Wasn't he being responsible? Wasn't he showing commitment by planning their future together? But Elena didn't want a project manager. She wanted a partner who could dance with life's uncertainty, who could laugh when plans fell apart, who could find joy in the unplanned moments. This is the illusion of control, the second great mistake that smart men make. We live in a world that rewards control. In business, the people who control markets, control resources, control outcomes, they win. So we bring that same mentality to relationships. We try to control our partner's moods, control the trajectory of the relationship, control outcomes to match our expectations. But the Stoics understood something profound. We control almost nothing except our own thoughts and actions. Everything else is subject to forces beyond us. Think about your last relationship. How much energy did you spend trying to control things that couldn't be controlled? How many arguments erupted because reality didn't match your expectations? How many times did you feel frustrated because your partner didn't respond the way you thought they should? This need for control doesn't come from strength, it comes from fear. Fear of uncertainty, fear of vulnerability, fear of being hurt. I want to ask you something personal, and I want you to really think about it. What are you afraid of losing? When you try to control your relationships, what are you really trying to protect? Is it your heart, your ego, your sense of safety in an uncertain world? The Stoics taught that attachment to specific outcomes is the root of suffering. Not attachment to people, attachment to outcomes. When you release your grip on how things should be and open yourself to how things actually are, something magical happens. You become present. You become available. You become real. Marcus eventually learned this lesson, but not before Elena left too. She told him on their last night together, "I feel like I'm suffocating in your plans. I need someone who can breathe with me, not someone who tries to schedule my breathing." Those words haunted him for months. Have similar words haunted you? Have you heard variations of "you're too controlling," or "you don't let me be myself," or "I feel like I can't breathe in this relationship"? If so, you're not alone. This is one of the most common ways that intelligent men destroy their own relationships. Mistake number 3. Emotional unavailability disguised as strength. After 2 failed relationships, Marcus made a decision. He would protect himself. He would be more guarded, more careful with his heart. He would maintain emotional distance to avoid getting hurt again. On the surface, this seemed like strength. It seemed like wisdom, but it was neither. It was fear wearing a mask. He met Jessica at a friend's wedding. She was smart, funny, emotionally mature. They started dating, and for the first few months, everything seemed perfect. But Jessica noticed something. Whenever conversations got too deep, Marcus would deflect. Whenever she tried to talk about feelings or vulnerability or the future, he would change the subject or make a joke. He was physically present but emotionally absent. He had confused stoicism with stoicism. Here's a critical distinction that many men miss. Lowercase stoicism, being emotionally unexpressive. Detached, cold is not the same as uppercase stoicism, the ancient philosophy. The Stoics weren't emotionless robots. Marcus Aurelius wrote with profound emotion in his meditations. Seneca wrote beautiful letters full of warmth and feeling. Epictetus taught with passion. They felt deeply. They loved deeply. But they didn't let emotions control them. There's a massive difference between not being controlled by emotions and not feeling emotions at all. Think about the men in your life who seem strong because they never show emotion. Are they actually strong, or are they just afraid? True strength isn't the absence of vulnerability. True strength is the courage to be vulnerable anyway. To open your heart knowing it might get broken. To love fully aware that loss is inevitable. When Marcus kept his emotional walls up with Jessica, he thought he was protecting himself. But he was actually guaranteeing his own loneliness. Have you built walls around your heart? Have you convinced yourself that not feeling is the same as not suffering? Let me tell you something that might hurt to hear. Those walls don't protect you from pain. They protect you from love. And without love, what's the point of any of this? Jessica stayed for 8 months trying to reach Marcus, trying to find the real person behind the defenses. But eventually, she couldn't do it anymore. "I'm in love with a ghost," she told him. "You're here, but you're not really here." After she left, Marcus had a breakdown. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, but the slow, grinding kind where you wake up each day and realize you're not really living, just existing. He looked back at his 3 failed relationships and saw the pattern clearly, for the first time. He had been protecting himself right into loneliness. He had been so afraid of getting hurt that he had guaranteed he would hurt. The Stoics taught that the obstacle is the way. The very thing we fear and avoid becomes the path to growth. Marcus's fear of vulnerability had become the obstacle that prevented him from experiencing real love. Mistake number 4, neglecting the present moment. Marcus's awakening led him to therapy, to meditation, to deeper study of actual Stoic philosophy. He began to understand his patterns. And then he met Rachel. By this point, Marcus had learned some lessons. He was more emotionally open, less controlling. But he still had blind spots, and the 4th mistake was one of the most insidious. Rachel was successful, driven, working on her PhD. Marcus was in the middle of launching a startup. Both had ambitious goals, busy schedules, plans for the future. They talked endlessly about where they'd be in 5 years and 10 years. They planned trips they'd take someday, dreams they'd fulfill eventually, the life they'd build together later. But later kept getting pushed back. "Once my startup gets funded," Marcus would say. "After I finish my dissertation," Rachel would echo. They were building a future together while forgetting to build a present. The relationship lasted 2 years, longer than any of Marcus's previous relationships. But something was missing. They were partners in planning, but strangers in the moment. They had dinner together while both checking emails. They went on walks while discussing business strategies. They lay in bed together while scrolling through their phones. They were together but not present. And slowly, imperceptibly, they drifted apart. Do you recognize this pattern in your own life? How often are you physically with someone but mentally elsewhere? How many moments have you missed because you were thinking about the next moment, the next goal, the next achievement? The Stoics, particularly Marcus Aurelius, emphasized the importance of the present moment. "Confine yourself to the present," he wrote. "Not because the future doesn't matter, but because the present is the only place where life actually happens." Think about your most cherished memories and relationships. I bet they're not the big planned moments. They're the random Tuesday evening when you laughed until your stomach hurt about something stupid. The morning you woke up early and watched the sunrise together without saying a word. The afternoon you got caught in the rain and decided to dance in it instead of running for cover. These moments don't happen in the future you're planning for. They happen in the present you're often ignoring. Rachel ended things on a perfectly ordinary Thursday. Marcus was surprised. "But we have so many plans," he said. "That's the problem," she replied. "We have endless plans but no presents. I feel like I'm dating your future self, not the person sitting in front of me right now. I need someone who's actually here, not always thinking about there. Her words cut deep because they were true. Marcus had been so focused on building a future that he forgot to build a relationship. He had been so obsessed with someday that he lost sight of today. Have you lost someone because you were always somewhere else in your mind? Have you missed the love that was right in front of you because you were focused on the love you'd have someday? This is heartbreaking when you realize it, but here's the beautiful thing about awareness. Once you see the pattern, you can change it. The Stoics believed in the power of attention, of bringing your full consciousness to each moment. That doesn't mean abandoning goals or not planning for the future. It means not sacrificing your present for a future that only exists in your imagination. Mistake number 5, the intellectual ego. Marcus's journey of self-discovery continued, and with each failed relationship he learned, he became more present, more emotionally available. But intelligence can be a double-edged sword, and the 5th mistake was one he didn't even recognize in himself until it was too late. He met Sophia at a philosophy lecture. She was brilliant, engaging, had her own thoughts on everything. They connected immediately on an intellectual level, debating ideas for hours, challenging each other's perspectives. But something started to shift. Marcus unconsciously began treating their relationship like a debate club. When Sophia shared her feelings, he'd analyze them. When she expressed a preference, he'd challenge it. But logically, that doesn't make sense, he'd say. Actually, studies show, he'd begin. He wasn't trying to be dismissive. He genuinely thought he was helping, engaging, being a good partner. But Sophia didn't feel helped. She felt dismissed. You can't let anything just be, she told him during an argument. Everything becomes a debate. Everything needs to be analyzed and picked apart and proven right or wrong. Sometimes I don't want to be educated. Sometimes I just want to be heard. Marcus was stunned. Wasn't intellectual engagement a good thing? Wasn't it important to pursue truth and accuracy? Yes, the Stoics would say, but wisdom knows when to engage the intellect and when to engage the heart. Let me ask you something and be honest with yourself. How often do you correct your partner? How often do you feel the need to explain why they're wrong or why your way is better? How often do you prioritize being right over being connected? The intellectual ego is sneaky because it disguises itself as virtue. I'm just being honest, we tell ourselves. I'm just trying to help them see clearly. But often, what we're really doing is establishing dominance, proving our intelligence, feeding our ego. Think about the last argument you had with someone you loved. Was it really about the thing you were arguing about? Or was it about who was right? The Stoics valued truth above almost everything, but they also understood that how you deliver truth matters. Epictetus taught his students to speak with care, to consider not just what is true but what is helpful, what is kind, what serves the relationship. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly to be gentle with others, to remember that everyone is doing their best with the understanding they have. Sophia stayed for a year trying to make Marcus understand. She'd say things like, I don't need you to fix my thinking. I need you to understand my feeling. But Marcus's intellectual ego kept getting in the way. He'd agree in principle, then do the exact same thing the next day. It wasn't conscious cruelty. It was unconscious arrogance. The belief, buried deep, that his way of thinking was superior, that if he could just get her to see things his way, everything would be better. When Sophia left, she said something that finally broke through. Marcus's defenses. You're so smart that you've become stupid about love. You think love is another puzzle to solve, another competition to win. But love isn't about being right. It's about being real with each other. Those words shattered something in Marcus. He realized he had been using his intelligence as a weapon and a shield, proving his worth by proving others wrong, protecting his ego by establishing intellectual dominance. Have you done this? Have you lost connection because you needed to be right? Have you won arguments but lost love in the process? The pain of recognizing this pattern is real, but that pain is also the doorway to change. The Stoics believe that wisdom begins with recognizing our own ignorance. Marcus had to become humble, enough to admit that being smart about ideas doesn't make you smack and be transformed into fuel. For our growth, if we have the wisdom to see it correctly, your pain, your failures, your heartbreaks, they're not evidence that you're broken. They're evidence that you're brave enough to keep trying, to keep opening your heart even when it's been shattered before. I know some of you watching this are sitting with fresh pain right now. You're replaying conversations with your ex, wondering what you could have done differently. You're lying awake at night, your chest tight with that familiar ache of loss. You're scrolling through old photos, torturing yourself with memories of when things were good. And you're asking yourself the question that haunts every heartbroken person. Will I ever stop feeling this way? Will I ever forget them? Will I ever love like that again? Here's what the Stoics would tell you. And what I'm telling you now, you don't need to forget. You need to transform. That pain you're feeling isn't something to escape from, it's something to move through. Every memory of love, even love that ended, is teaching you something about what you truly value, what you truly need, who you truly are. The pain of losing someone you loved is the price we pay for the beauty of having loved them at all. And yes, it hurts. God, does it hurt? But that hurt is proof that you're alive, that you're capable of deep feeling, that you haven't closed yourself off to the world. Think about your ex for a moment, not with bitterness or anger, but with honest reflection. What did they teach you about yourself? What patterns did that relationship reveal? What did you learn about your capacity to love? Your fears, your strengths, your growth edges? Maybe they left because you made some of these 9 mistakes. Maybe they left for reasons that had nothing to do with you. But either way, the relationship served a purpose. It showed you something essential about who you are and who you're becoming. And here's the truth that might be hard to hear but necessary to understand. You can't change the past, but you can change the pattern. You can't make your ex come back, but you can become the kind of person who doesn't repeat the same mistakes in the next relationship. You can't erase the heartbreak, but you can use it as a catalyst for the deepest growth of your life. The Stoics taught that we don't control what happens to us, but we absolutely control how we interpret and respond to what happens to us. So what are you going to do with your pain? Are you going to let it harden you, make you cynical, convince you that vulnerability is weakness and emotional distance is strength? Or are you going to let it break you open, soften you, teach you to feel even more deeply, to love even more courageously? The choice is yours, and it's the most important choice you'll make, because that choice will determine not just your next relationship. 8. Of sitting with discomfort as you build new ways of being in relationship. Maybe tomorrow you'll be in a conversation with someone you care about, and they'll express emotion, and you'll feel that familiar urge to fix it, to analyze it, to offer solutions. That's your moment. That's when you pause, breathe, and instead of going into your head, you stay in your heart. You say, tell me more about how that feels. You offer presence instead of problem solving. That one choice, repeated over and over, becomes a new pattern. Maybe next week you'll find yourself trying to control an outcome in your relationship, making plans, managing your partner's expectations, steering things toward your vision. That's your moment. That's when you notice the fear underneath the control. When you ask yourself what you're really trying to protect. When you practice letting go and trusting the process. That one choice repeated over and over becomes freedom. Maybe this month you'll feel threatened by your partner's success, or you'll find yourself competing rather than celebrating. That's your moment. That's when you examine your ego, when you remember that their victory doesn't diminish you, when you practice genuine celebration without reference to yourself. That one choice repeated over and over becomes security. Maybe this year you'll face a situation where every instinct tells you to protect yourself, to maintain distance, to keep your walls up. That's your moment. That's when you choose vulnerability anyway, when you risk being hurt because the alternative, never being truly known, is worse. That one choice, repeated over and over, becomes courage. The Stoics didn't believe in overnight transformation. They believed in daily practice, in small choices compounded over time, in the gradual refinement of character through conscious action. Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations not as a book for others, but as daily reminders to himself about how to live with virtue. He had to remind himself every single day to be patient, to be kind, to see obstacles as opportunities, to focus on what he could control. Even the Emperor of Rome, one of the most powerful men in the world, had to do this daily work of self-examination and conscious choice. So what makes you think you're any different? What makes you think you can watch one video, have one insight, and suddenly be transformed? You can't, but you can start. You can begin the practice today. You can make one different choice, and then tomorrow you can make another. And slowly, imperceptibly at first, you start becoming someone different. Someone better, someone ready for real love. I want you to think about the person you want to be in relationships. Not the person you are now, but the person you're capable of becoming. That man who can feel deeply without being controlled by emotion. That man who can be strong and vulnerable simultaneously. That man who can think clearly and feel fully.